I'm at the Amerton Railway in Staffordshire. I'm going to reacquaint myself with a locomotive that I haven't seen for 51 years. On August 28, 1972, I and a group of friends were on a two-day train spotting trip to the Crewe area. We stopped at Stafford to look at the two diesel shunters. Outside the station was an industrial steam locomotive on a plinth. Little did I realise that after all this time I'd be seeing her here at Amerton in steam. And to find out how she came from the plinth at Stafford to be restored, to be cared for, brought back to steam. I was born in October 1955, and at 18 months old my mother wrote "Trains, trains, trains" in a baby book, and they've stuck with me on a daily basis ever since. My father worked for Hanley Page on the Halifax 4-engine bomber during the war, and he passed his love of engineering to me at a very early age, teaching me how to drill and tap Whitworth threads and to silver solder. Around the age of 5, I was given the Wonder Book of Engineering Wonders, and it remains my favourite book to this day. It would be my choice on a desert island. On leaving school at 18, my only career choice was to work for British Rail, and I joined the Civil Engineers Department. I had the happiest and most exciting years of my career with British Rail, the highlight being resident engineer Newcastle on the East Coast mainline electrification. 51 years on, I'm at Amerton seeing Isabel in steam for the first time, and Peter Bell has been a big part of this story of bringing Isabel here, but he knows her story before she came to Amerton when she was at Stafford. So Peter, please tell me the story of Isabel and how she came to be here.
Isabel survived on the plinth until the late 70s. She came off and she was going to go to the Garden Festival at Stoke, but never made it. But before that, you've got to really remember Isabel has been very lucky, because at Cliff Hill there was a selection of locos which were standing there. Bagnalls wanted a loco back for their works in the early 50s, and the only locos which survived were the ones at the front.
Isabel was built in 1897 by W.G. Bagnall Limited in Stafford. She was destined for the 2-foot gauge railway of Cliff Hill Quarry in Leicestershire, aptly named the Cliff Hill Mineral Railway, a quarry which at the turn of the 20th century was mining granite stone. Isabel was recovered from Cliff Hill Quarry in the 1950s by W.G. Bagnall Limited and placed on a plinth outside the Castle Engine Works in Stafford between 1953 to 1961.
Bagnalls got Isabel back. Bagnalls put her on a plinth outside the works, and she was there, cared for, cosmetically restored, didn't steam, until GEC bought Bagnalls in the early 60s. And GEC didn't really want a steam locomotive manufacturer. So what was going to happen to Isabel? Could easily end up with scrap, because that was that sort of era. There was everything being lost in the white heat of technology. But there was a chap from Stafford Railway Circle who lived beside Bagnall's work, and he'd watched Isabel and the works from his childhood. And he wrote on behalf of the Stafford Railway Circle to Bagnalls asking if they could have Isabel. Eventually, after 1 or 2 letters, Isabel was given to Stafford Railway Circle, which proved to be not the best thing in the world really, because what you do with a steam engine and you're a model railway society. So fortunately this guy worked for Stafford Council as a surveyor, and by whatever means he did, he negotiated a deal where Isabel was given to Stafford Borough Council, who put her on a plinth outside.
Isabel was relocated on a plinth outside Stafford Railway Station in 1963, where she stayed until the early 1980s. I'm standing with Lawrence Hodgkinson, who has spent an incredible 36 years at Amerton. That really is something special. So Lawrence, could you tell me a little bit about your involvement with the railway and what you've done?
Yeah, well, it all came about with a phone call from a friend of mine. I still call him a friend, despite what happened. I'd been involved with standard gauge preservation, as had he, but we'd sort of taken different paths as life developed. And he said, have you heard about Isabel? Isabel, the little steam engine that's at Stafford, and was in a bad way. It was in possibly, it had been dismantled and could possibly be scrapped.
She languished in a garage, forlorn, half in bits, with the boiler down Devon somewhere. And there's a guy called Phil Jones rang a chap called Alan Civil, who was a Bagnall enthusiast, wrote a brilliant book on it. And this Phil Jones said to Alan Civil, we've got to do something with Isabel, because she's going to be lost. And what they agreed to do was meet and try and decide what they're going to do. So they met and came up with a plan which they put to the council. And the council agreed to this plan under certain conditions. So they were granted Isabel to look after and restore in the council workshop.
So he said, a group of us are trying to get together to try to do something about it. So we did get together. We decided that it would be practical to take the bits of Isabel, which someone had tried to restore, and to complete the restoration, and after discussion with Stafford Borough Council, who'd had a rather unfortunate experience up to that point, we were able to convince them we knew what we were doing, and they agreed that we could take the parts of Isabel, restore it to working order, and operate it to earn its keep, to keep it in working order, provided that it stayed within the borough of Stafford.
Isabel's full restoration to working order was completed in the early 1990s.
But then, of course, you've got a dilemma. What do you do with a locomotive? And of course, the group didn't own it. She was owned by Stafford Council. So
there was only two problems. One was to restore Isabel, and the other one was to build a railway within the borough of Stafford to run it on. And after contact with some very friendly people within Stafford Borough and their councils, the officers, they suggested we try Amerton Farm.
But the trouble was, there was nowhere really, apart from Amerton Farm, which at the time was trying to move from agricultural predominance, if you like, to other pursuits. And the lady in charge of Amerton was very keen on trying to bring things together.
So we came here, looked around, greenfield site, and after some negotiation we started to build a railway.
So in 1990 we were granted permission to build a railway here. A lot of collieries were closing, I don't know whether you remember that. So there was lots and lots of bits of rail and stuff like that. So the group, as it was, scrounged rail from various bits of collieries.
We came down here and started literally greenfield, getting a machine in, skimming the grass off, putting hardcore down, putting ballast down, buying track, sleepers, rails, stone, wherever we could get it cheaply, to lay the first section of track to start operating, to start the ball rolling, so we had a source of income.
And we laid, after a year or two, enough line to allow us to go up to a part which we call stump siding, which is more or less where the industrial is, and return back. So we ran there and back.
The council did contribute to the cost of the original shed here, which was their contribution, if you like, to the project, because they saw that Isabel was part of the history of Stafford. The company that made it, Bagnalls of Stafford, was well known within the town and was known in the railway industry around the world as a small manufacturer with a great reputation. So they were willing, the council were willing to contribute to the shed to keep Isabel in, and we could build up there with things like coaches to carry passengers and anything else we needed. So it went from there and brought Isabel here, started to run it on a short section of track that we'd laid down, and the railway's built up from there.
but we were always going to build a loop. Unfortunately, things didn't go quite to plan for the Williams, so the whole thing was up in the air. What's going to happen?
Okay, well, we really got involved more when the farm which is adjoining us, who owned the land, came to a bit of a crisis, and they decided they've got to sell the land. So Chris and I got involved at that point. The company, as it was, had tried to get a mortgage before on a couple of occasions and not succeeded, because being a narrow gauge railway run by volunteers, it was very hard to justify a substantial mortgage, even offset against what is effectively farmland. So it came to a crisis point. The farm had to sell. It tried to go to auction. Chris can tell you a bit more about that in a minute. My role was that I'd got a business at the time and we were doing okay, and HSBC at the time had not had a very good press. We were coming out of 2008, 2009. Banks weren't seen as being very friendly or very good. And I approached my friendly bank manager and said, would you like some good press? And he said, oh yes, please. And I said, okay, give me a mortgage for this railway. And his sort of face went dark. And then when he'd recovered, we had to talk about what we could do. And we got together with what they needed. Chris put together the business case. I put together a whole load of other stuff that was needed. And the bank managers went away to think about it. And then, to cut a long story short, we got turned down.
Now, in 1997, to get the sleepers, there was a guy came to help us get a loan. And he was an accountant. And we put together a business case, which he basically sort of wasn't terribly keen at, because we had no assets. And he said, what you've got to have in a business is assets, something tangible you can sell or raise money against and stuff like that. And that struck a chord with me. And what we got the permission to do with the landowner as it was then, Paul Williams, is that we could actually extend and build a carriage shed, which is our boundary.
You've mentioned the efforts that you made to raise funding, but to do that required a business plan, and I think you, Chris, put that plan together, which is a massive undertaking in itself.
So I got some experience of writing business plan proposals, and my field of work was actually in property and property management. So the fact it was a land sale was, if you like, sort of fell into my lap a little. So we had to start from a fairly clean sheet with a business plan, and it was a comprehensive exercise. Big job in modelling the cash to prove that we could actually afford to run the railway and pay the mortgage.
But the two guys who were dealing with us from HSBC were both decent blokes. They resubmitted the case rather than locally to Birmingham, to the Birmingham headquarters, and yet again it got turned down. And so they came to us and said we need a bit more information, so Chris produced even more spreadsheets and we resubmitted, and it went to London and we got approval.
We raised enough money because we had assets which we could use as collateral, and we secured our future.
So I became treasurer and subsequently secretary. I'm now secretary of the limited liability company. We started off as a group of friends, then a society, and for various practical reasons we became a limited liability company. Limited by guarantee, having no share capital. The idea being that anything that's done for the railway stays with the railway. People can put as much effort as they like into it, but they can't take any financial gain from it. So whatever we do, whatever we leave to pass on to others, will stay as the Amerton Railway for as long as anyone can foresee.
I'm speaking to Robin Mathams, who's been at the Amerton Railway for, I understand, 7 years. You've been working on a particularly interesting and fascinating project, but I think your involvement didn't start off with necessarily the sexiest part of the job, but could you tell me a little bit about it, please?
Yes, it was the restoration of the former Waterhouses North Staffordshire Railway signal box, and we'd heard about it, and it was sitting in a garden up in Wetton in Derbyshire.
At the Isabel Gala in 1997, a guy came across and said, I know where there's a narrow gauge signal box. And he went to it and he couldn't find it. But when he went to the loo, he spotted it in the guy's garden. And he went and saw the guy who didn't want to part with it, but got the phone number, rang him up a couple of times. We went and saw it in the June of 1997, and it looked in good condition. It looked like it would transport easily, and it looked just what we wanted, but he wouldn't part with it.
Originally at Waterhouses there were two signal boxes, one for the leak and manifold narrow gauge and this one, which is the standard gauge. And then they rationalised the whole thing in 1915, I think it is, and the leak and manifold signal box was shut down. But the two levers were required to operate signals, so they transferred them into this signal box, and we know exactly where they were, and we know the date because they put an extension on the back of the box to house the throw of the levers, and the carpenter who put that there very helpfully carved the date on the timbers. Unfortunately, they had to be covered over panelling, but that we definitely do know. So it then became the signal box which controlled both the narrow gauge and the standard gauge. And then in 1943, the whole thing was abandoned and it was then bought privately.
But then we got the foot and mouth. And this guy ran mountain bike trekking tours, which effectively stopped because of the foot and mouth. Didn't have a business. He was going to move to Spain. Lost my business card, but he remembered the bit about Amerton. Came here, and I got to ring him and spoke to him again. He says, yep, you can have the signal box. I went, and he explained what was happening. I said, yep, okay, we'll have it. And we were fortunate enough to arrange transport, bring it back. But at the time, you see, it was unrestored.
Peter Bell, our current chairman at the time, asked me if I would get involved with restoring the signal box. I agreed to it, so hence started work on the signal box. One of the first jobs we had to do was the legs had been cut off. We had to prop the signal box up and prop the roof up and do one leg at a time.
Roger Strike, who's a master craftsman, carpenter, what have you, he volunteered to undertake the restoration of the building. So he got going on that, and then I've known Roger for many, many years. We were both members of the Sutton Coldfield Railway Society, so he wrote me in. Can you paint? Yes. Right, you're in. So basically I ended up painting it. It's taken me all that length of time to do it.
We saved as much as we could of the original, even splicing some of the original boards. If the corner was rotten, I didn't renew the board. I just renewed the corner. I feel very proud. Now, obviously, there's been a lot of publicity about the box since it was completed, and I hadn't really even thought of that side of the issue at all. So I just thought, yes, it's very, very nice. It's me and quite a few other people involved, but yes, I was the instigator of it.
And I was particularly impressed by the attention to detail that you've shown. A good example of this are the wood screws that are all slotted, and you've got the slots pointing in the right directions. Also a wonderful patras plate behind the light switch, and the clamp to the cable is very impressive.
Attention to detail, we believe, is absolutely critical. Even the smallest detail. You mentioned the screw heads and so forth. There isn't a cross-headed screw anywhere in the structure. And and other things that we've done is that where the box has been damaged by wear and tear over the years, we've kept the damage there because, again, as we discussed earlier on, that is all part and parcel of telling the history of the signal box. So once we'd done all of that, I suddenly got the idea, I wonder if we should present this for a National Railway Heritage Award. So I floated the idea with a couple of directors. I said, well, why not? So we got the forms, filled them in. We had a whole afternoon with the assessors who came up, and they went over the thing with a fine tooth comb. And the next thing we'd heard was that we'd been shortlisted. It was an invitation down to London to the National Railway Heritage Award ceremony. So off we went, and it was quite overwhelming actually. We had people like Network Rail and Avanti and all these sorts of people. And in our particular category, there was about, I think it was about 5 or 6 entries. And we were declared joint winners. Roger went up and myself went up, and we collected the plaque from His Royal Highness the Duke of Gloucester. And the plaque is now sitting on the signal box. And if I may say so, we're rather proud of it. But it's a real fitting climax of Roger's career in carpentry, joinery, restoration work and what have you. So we're all absolutely delighted that we won it.
I'm talking to the Whitfield family, who live locally to the railway and have been coming here for some years, en famille, all 4 of them. And they've been heavily involved with support to the railway.
Yeah, we did start to get involved. As I say, Josh, we came because he wanted to go on a railway ride one day, and it's just a mile round track, so we thought it'd be a nice thing for, as he was at 1-year-old, for his attention span. But the more and more we came, the more I got to talk to some of the volunteers. And that's the thing that amazed me, is that they are volunteers. There's not a single person here that gets paid. So right from the maintenance of all the engines, the upkeep of all the equipment, all through to all the events, everyone is a volunteer, and that just absolutely amazed me. So when I heard about the Queen's Award for Volunteer Service through some other work I've been doing, I just thought of Amerton straight away.
In 2021, Amerton Railway was awarded the Queen's Award, the equivalent of an MBE for a voluntary group. I wondered how much work it must have been to submit all of the paperwork.
It is quite daunting. There is an awful lot that they need to put into it. It's not just I like this place, you should try it. It is very much down to the nitty-gritty of all the health and safety information that they have to run through, how they're working with education, how they're helping elder generations as well. So it's right from young, right all the way to old, and how they're helping each one. So I had lots of conversations with Pete Gully, who is the chairman here, but also with some of the other volunteers to see what they get out of it. And every single one spoke with immense passion. And I just tried to put as much of that passion as I could into my application, and thank goodness they were lucky enough to be awarded it in 2021.
Sausage sandwich for you.
Great things have been carried out at this railway, and one very strong strain that's come through to me is the fact you've got in place a succession plan for the future and encouraging young people and transferring skills. And when you've paid off your loan, is there a plan after that of where you may wish to go? Is there a dream?
Well, I think the board, which Peter and I don't sit on, have got various ideas about how we can develop further. I think the probable constraint is not perhaps going to be so much funding, but as usual, the manpower, person power, I probably ought to say, because we do have a lot of women volunteers as well, to carry out what we want to do, together with maintaining what we've already got, which is a big job, as well as, of course, as running a railway service, and importantly, enjoying ourselves doing it, because we're all volunteers, we're all interested in narrow gauge railways, and that's why we come here and give our time and effort.
It's like all these things, some of the opportunities only come around once, don't they? And if you don't really grasp it, you're lost forever.
I'm very proud of it, but also I'm proud of the people I've met along the way, because part of the project is the ironmongery that you see puffing up and down and the track and so forth, but the other part is the people behind it. And over the years, people have come and gone, all volunteers, with their own skills and abilities. And really what we've got in the end is a result of whatever people can contribute toward it. And one of the concerns nowadays is getting the younger people to pick up the torch, as you will, and carry on to keep it going. So we do have a few members, and you've seen them around today. We do everything we can to encourage them, but it's not easy in this day and age when everybody's on their iPhone or their computer or WhatsApp or whatever these strange things are. But we do try as much as we can, and we give them every opportunity to develop themselves, to learn about the railway, but also they're learning life skills as well. So it's good for them and it's good for us. So yeah, fingers crossed for the future.
Lawrence, I've spent the day here, and the message that's come over very, very strongly from everyone, all your colleagues, is their pride in what you've achieved over the years, and I can sense that in you. So really my question to you is, after all of this, how do you feel?
That's a very little badge that I'm very, very proud of.
And I think you should be, because I think we've spent the day with you, and I feel very proud to have met all of you.
Oh, good, good.
Lawrence, I'm really grateful
Yep.
for you giving us your story.
Yeah.
It's much appreciated,
Yep.
and thank you so much.
Well, thank you for coming down and seeing what we're up to. Thank you.
Not at all, thank you. It's really difficult to sum up our time at Amerton, because so many words could be used to describe this experience. It's been absolutely wonderful, phenomenal, heartwarming and inspiring. I've never seen so many people with the enthusiasm at Heritage Railway, and I've been to many. It speaks volumes for them. All that they've achieved, it really is incredible. And importantly, they've future-proofed this railway. They've got a scheme to involve young people. They've got a succession policy, and it works. Not only that, you look at the standard of workmanship around the place, those skills are being passed on to young people. To say that it's in good hands would be rude to the people that work here. It's in very, very good hands, and it's been wonderful for us to be here and be a part of it. A great experience. Thank you to everyone at Amerton. If you enjoyed this discovery of how one of Staffordshire's top tourist attractions came to be, please make sure you tune in to episode 2, where we go behind the scenes at Amerton to learn more about the younger volunteers and the operations side of the railway.